Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. The call is going to be a little different today. Those of you that have been following our calls know that on occasion I have to opt out of these calls because I've been invited to an international call that has information that's relevant to these currencies, the situation in Iraq, and the upcoming election. They seem to do these calls, and this particular call is coming out of Brussels. They do these calls, I guess, 7 or 8 at night in Brussels. It's always on a Wednesday, and I think as a courtesy to the United States, they do them that late so that, we can listen to them during the day. Of course, the call falls at noon on the East Coast and 9 a.m. on the West Coast. So on the rare occasions they have these calls that intersects with our call, and I've really got to be involved in this call, not as a participant, but as an individual that's listening to the information. I glean a lot of information from these calls. They usually spend the first 10 or 15 minutes, doing introductions, so that gives me a little bit of a window here to talk today. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the program that we've put into place or have a Q&A. I would suggest that newer callers go to either YouTube or IQD calls and listen to our call of September 23rd, because that call has all the information about the program we've put in place to assist you. But I'm going to go ahead right now and talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq. We're looking at the same situation. We're looking at a window, a most plausible date for the reinstitution of the dinar in January of 2021. But there is a scenario for October. So for those of you that may not have your affairs in order or may not understand what that involves, I strongly suggest you call in and listen to our call of January 23rd, because you do not want to miss this window if it should hit in October. Again, we continue to believe that January is the most plausible date, but this could occur in October. There are two issues of importance today that I want to talk about. One is the banking reforms in Iraq, and second is the continued Iranian interference into Iraqi affairs. First, with regard to banking, as most of you know, the kind of ineffective and feckless governor of the CBI, al-Alaq, has been replaced with Mustafa Galeb Makhaif. The guy is squeaky clean and has great credentials. He has announced that the CBI will be releasing their white paper very shortly, perhaps even this week. It deals with several issues: the re-education of the Iraqi citizens, the completion of the project to delete the zeros, and absolutely stopping the auctions. Now, the auctions have not stopped for one very simple reason. 90% of the current revenue generated by the banking industry comes from these auctions. So the government is moving as quickly as they can to find other sources of revenue. First, by expanding the private economy and liberalizing banking regulations, allowing for more loans to small businesses and individuals. And they're also going to eliminate as many as 90% of the private banks. So all of this combined should basically eliminate the auctions altogether, because they will have a substantial revenue source coming from their own internal economy, and many of the private banks will cease to exist. The CBI has also announced that they are initiating as many as 20,000 individual contracting programs to rebuild their infrastructure. Now, the government of Iraq simply does not have enough U.S. dollar reserve currencies to pay government and military salaries and pay for these contracts. they can no longer borrow the substantial amount of money they need in order to pay these salaries and fund these contracts. Therefore, the only plausible solution is the reinstatement and revaluation of their currency so that they can pay their citizens in their own currency when they reinstitute, and then pay the international contractors when their currencies revalue globally. With regard to the Iranian issue, there is a lot going on. The first thing that is happening is the corrupt pro-Iranian officials within the government are being neutralized. That's as the result of the release of the corrupt files and implementation of the accountability and justice law probably after the elections in June. Now, that's why al-Maliki and Amiri, who are preeminent pro-Iranian corrupt officials, have already made several trips to Iran, and now they're trying to undercut the al-Kazemi government. They're going to be unsuccessful at this for a couple of reasons. First, al-Kazemi has already announced that he's not going to run for re-election in June, meaning he has the freedom to do the things that need to be done. And second, it makes no sense to try to undercut al-Kazemi because, once again, he's not running for re-election, and that's not the problem that the pro-Iranian corrupt officials have. The problem they're going to have is with the new government coming in June and the implementation of the accountability and justice law. Now, with regard to Iran as well, the Trump sanctions have really crippled Iran. Their economy has completely tanked, and the rial in the last 30 to 45 days has lost almost all of its value. So Iran is basically hanging by a thread right now. What they're probably going to do is try to hang in until after the United States election. If Joe Biden were to win, and I don't think that's going to happen, but if Joe Biden were to win, then Iran is, in their view, is back in business. But if Donald Trump is reelected, the Iranians know that they cannot possibly survive another 4 years of Trump. They're willing to suspend the international terrorism and some of the other things they're doing. What they cannot risk is having their regime, the mullahs in Iran, overthrown. And that's what will happen if Trump is reelected. So after the election and probably before the inauguration of Trump, the Iranians are going to come to the table. They're going to cut a deal. And, of course, the most important part of that deal from the standpoint of the United States is Iran's complete and permanent exit from Iraq and all of the internal affairs of the Iraqis. Lastly, after the meeting between al-Kazemi and Donald Trump, Kazemi made a trip to Brussels to speak with NATO. And, of course, what Trump's been doing is he's been bringing the troops home. He wants the Middle East to be resolved with Middle East troops or international troops. He does not want the United States to spearhead any more of what he refers to as police actions. And it looks as though that NATO will be replacing the United States as the spearhead of the coalition forces to force Iran to exit Iraq and take their militias with them. So this is all good news. Everything's moving in the right direction. Again, we're looking at January of 2021 to be the most plausible date for the reinstitution of the dinar. But again, there is a scenario for the reinstitution of the currency in October. Frankly, from a political standpoint, it would be very advantageous for the Trump administration to have the reinstitution of the currency before the election. We've gotten into all of that information. Now, again, for our newer callers, I think you should go to our call of January 23rd to get all of the information about the program we've put in place to assist you. I will give you our contact information, though. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. Our email address is trusts with an S unlimitedllc@gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. I'm sorry I have to cut this call short. I enjoy providing all of the information to our newer callers and the Q&A as well. But this other call having to do with what's going on with NATO, I think is real important for us. And so I'm going to try to glean as much information as I can and provide it for next week's call. We will be back, of course, next week. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we will be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.